Otangelo Grasso, and I'm just going to let him get right into it because we're going to give him his presentation yesterday was incredible. So let's give him a welcome, Otangelo Grasso.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. Today we venture into the following topic, from silent cloth to visual testimony, redeploying the shroud in global evangelism, transforming the world's most studied relic into Christianity's most powerful evangelistic tool besides the Gospels themselves. Yesterday we witnessed this moment when the shroud first stepped into the modern world. That negative plate from 1898 didn't just reveal a face. It opened a conversation that's still unfolding. But today, we shift our lens. The question now is not whether it's real, it's what you are going to do with it. Jesus gave one mission to his church: go into all world and proclaim the gospel. The Shroud of Turin, a silent witness of Christ's passion, may be one of the most overlooked instruments for that mission. Not as an idol, but as a visual testimony, a relic that speaks when words fall short. Perhaps alongside the written scriptures, the shroud can be seen as a visual testimony. Some have even called it the fifth gospel, in a metaphorical sense, an image that confronts the world with the reality of the crucifixion. Some refer to it as the fifth gospel, not in canonical terms, but as a witness in image, pointing to the same Christ revealed in Scripture. Three pillars support the shroud's authenticity. 1. Scientific evidence, forensic accuracy that defies medieval forgery. 2. Historical continuity, documented presence across 2 millennia. And 3. Theological alignment, perfect correspondence with gospel accounts. Where science, history, and faith converge, doubt often dissolves. Why should we promote the shroud today? Because in our skeptical, visual saturated world, the shroud engages where arguments often fail. It isn't just to be guarded in a cathedral in Turin. It's for missions. It's not just for scholars. It's for seekers. And its testimony transcends language. In a world hungry for truth, they can see this may be the clearest image of Christ they'll ever encounter. The question isn't whether the shroud is real, it's whether we'll keep it hidden or finally let it be seen where it hasn't been before. Most 20th century scholars focused on the shroud's authenticity: carbon dating, textile analysis, blood chemistry. But the global church missed the broader question: how could this relic serve evangelism across cultures and continents? The sobering reality. World population in 2025 stands at 8.19 billion. Asia and Africa alone account for 6.39 billion, 78% of humanity. Yet in these regions, awareness of the shroud remains probably under 1%. While scholars and synodologists concentrated on defending authenticity within Western academia, the vast majority of the world was never even shown the evidence. This isn't just data, it's a crisis in mission. We've had the evidence for 125 years but failed to share it globally. The Apostle Thomas said doubtfully, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, I will not believe." Today's generation demands evidence. The shroud provides it, not as proof, but as an invitation. It preaches reason and revelation, history and hope, skepticism and faith. For the modern Thomas, the shroud whispers, "Come and see." The shroud is a silent sermon, not just for the West, but for all humanity. Its universal language, suffering, sacrifice, and mystery, speaks across cultures. But the Church has failed to bring this message beyond its familiar frontiers. It's time to think strategically. If we care about global missions, we must ask, how can this image reach the unreached? How can this cloth be exhibited and contextualized across nations and languages? To understand where we are going, we need to see where we've been. Let's trace the Shroud's journey through history. Before we look forward, let's look back. Let's retrace the history of the Shroud's public witness. Our journey begins in Constantinople, where the Mendelian, possibly the folded shroud, drew pilgrims across the Byzantine Empire. In 1204, Crusader Robert de Clary described seeing the Sindoins where our Lord was wrapped, displayed in the church of Blancharnaille. This wasn't just religious art, it was transformative encounter. After Constantinople's fall, the shroud vanished, only to reappear 150 years later in Lirey, France. The gap in documented history only deepens the mystery. How did this Byzantine treasure reach medieval France? Geoffroy de Charny wasn't just a collector, he was an evangelist. His exhibitions at Lirey drew thousands of pilgrims who came to see and were transformed by seeing. De Charny understood what we're rediscovering. The shroud's power lies not in private preservation, but in public proclamation. The chapel in Lirey became a place of deep encounter. Pilgrims wept, skeptics became believers, lives were transformed. This was medieval evangelism in action, where a single image stirred hearts more than 1,000 words. The shroud was already at work in the mission field. This 14th century lead medallion commemorates pilgrim visits to Lirey exhibitions. It shows two clerics displaying the shroud with its distinctive herringbone weave, the first certain artistic representation. Even medieval believers understood. The shroud's impact spreads through sharing, not hiding. By the late 15th century, the shroud became both dynastic treasure and spiritual symbol for the House of Savoy. They recognized its dual power, political legitimacy and religious significance. The shroud has always been more than a relic, it's been a tool of influence. In 1578, Duke Emmanuel Philibert moved the shroud from Chambéry to Turin for strategic reasons. Safety from religious conflicts, economic benefits from pilgrim tourism, political legitimacy through sacred presence. The move proved prescient. Turin became a pilgrimage destination, boosting both economy and influence. He decided to move the shroud to his capital city of Turin in Italy, which was under his control and considered a safer location. The shroud would also attract pilgrims and tourists, thus boosting the local economy and consolidating the Savoy's political power in the region. The transfer also fulfilled Charles Borromeo's pilgrimage vow after Milan's plague ended. Rather than the dangerous Alpine journey to Chambéry, the Duke brought the shroud to Turin. This demonstrated early understanding of the shroud's accessibility principle, bring the witness to the people. Using AI reconstruction, we can visualize the momentous meeting where Duke Emmanuel Philibert welcomed Cardinal Borromeo to Turin with the shroud. These weren't just ceremonial exchanges. They were strategic deployments of sacred witness for maximum spiritual and political impact. Throughout the centuries, shroud exhibitions marked significant moments. Royal marriages, military victories, religious festivals, times of crisis. The 1737 exhibition for Charles Emmanuel's third wedding drew massive crowds, demonstrating the shroud's enduring power to unite communities in shared wonder. These exhibitions weren't just displays, they were transformative events where faith met grandeur. Architecture became cathedral, crowds became congregations, spectacle became spirituality. The reverent masses remind us, the shroud thrives in public witness. We've seen how the shroud stirred hearts from Constantinople to Turin. But what changed when the camera was invented? May 28, 1898. Secondo Pia's camera changed everything. The photographic negative revealed what the naked eye couldn't see, the true face of the crucified Christ staring back with startling clarity. This wasn't just scientific discovery, it was evangelistic breakthrough. The shroud had found its modern voice. From 1898 forward, the shroud entered a new era, not just veneration but investigation. The photograph didn't diminish the mystery, it amplified it globally. Suddenly, the shroud wasn't confined to Turin's cathedral. It could reach audiences Pia never imagined. The authentication debates served their purpose. Now we must ask, how can we deploy this visual testimony to reach the 6 billion who've never seen it? Let's shift our lens. Let's move beyond proving the shroud to proclaiming Christ. The decades of authentication debates have served their purpose, but now we must ask a different question. How can we deploy this visual testimony to reach hearts that have never encountered the gospel? In our skeptical world, the shroud engages where arguments often fail. It speaks to the doubting Thomas generation, those who need to see before they believe. Unlike verbal apologetics, it transcends language barriers and cultural divides. The shroud doesn't impose, it invites investigation. For the modern Thomas generation, the shroud whispers, "Come and see." And that whisper can reach further than any sermon if we'll carry it beyond our familiar circles. The shroud carries something profoundly contagious, mystery that provokes investigation, visual evidence that stirs emotion, and ultimately a confrontation with the reality of Christ's suffering and love. It whispers, consider, think, investigate, explore, and that whisper can pierce louder than any sermon. The Bible doesn't require the shroud for confirmation. Scripture stands complete on its own. But for the doubting heart, the visual mind, and the historically inclined, the shroud can be the entry point that bypasses intellectual resistance and speaks directly to the soul. It's not a proof text, it's a provocation that leads to deeper truth. Even among believers, many have grown lukewarm in their faith. The shroud reawakens the imagination by reconnecting doctrine to suffering, salvation to sacrifice. It transforms abstract theology into visceral reality, showing not just an idea, but the body, a face, blood. In doing so, it rehumanizes the divine and reignites passion for the gospel. What can you do to make the shroud known beyond your familiar circles? This isn't about grand gestures. It's about simple sharing, social media posts, casual conversations, email forwards, book recommendations, exhibition visits. Every Christian can be a shroud ambassador. Perhaps you're not called to foreign missions or lack travel funds. Social media offers unprecedented reach. Facebook connections worldwide, Messenger for personal dialogue, Instagram for visual storytelling, YouTube for deeper education, WhatsApp for intimate sharing. The digital mission field is limitless and accessible. Pastor Moses from Kenya had never heard of the shroud until a Facebook conversation changed everything. Wow, this is powerful. I didn't know about this. Sir, please, welcome to Kenya to teach this. I believe many people don't know this. One conversation, one connection, one mission field opened. Every believer can be a shroud ambassador. One social media post, one conversation, one forwarded message. Pastor Moses in Kenya discovered it through one Facebook message. Your next share could open an entire mission field. Tony Cunliffe's The Case of the Missing Body has become my primary introduction tool, freely available on the web. I translated it into multiple languages via Google Translate. Sometimes the most effective evangelism tools are the simplest ones. A small book can open a vast door. Some time ago, I started Shroud Academy with the vision to share Shroud knowledge around the world. I run a very active WhatsApp group with close to 200 members from all over the world. If you would like to be part, send me an email and I will send you the invite link to participate. Guy Powell's YouTube channel became the platform for sharing the Shroud Academy vision with Ken Stevenson and Joe Marino. Digital collaboration amplifies individual efforts exponentially. One conversation becomes many through modern media. Pastor Rajesh Rai from India embraced the Shroud vision and organized a Zoom meeting with tribal pastors from nearby villages. His interview with Guy Powell demonstrates how indigenous leaders can contextualize the Shroud's message for their communities. The Zoom meeting equipped pastors and evangelists with Shroud knowledge and passion, practical integration strategies, cultural adaptation techniques, community outreach methods. Local leaders are always the most effective messengers. Shroud conferences in strategic locations can create regional hubs. Australia completed, Hong Kong for China access, India for South Asian reach, Kenya for African impact. Strategic geography multiplies evangelistic impact. The Spanish Mystery Man exhibition has drawn over 250,000 visitors across Spain and Italy, proving professional execution attracts crowds. Financial sustainability is achievable. Cultural adaptation works. Regional impact is measurable and success breeds replication. My visit to Regina Apostolorum's permanent Shroud exhibition revealed both opportunity and challenge. It is an impressive permanent exhibition, but the information panels were created 20 years ago, missing recent discoveries. So I thought there is a huge update potential. Meeting Emanuela Marinelli, Father Andrew Spencer, and Joseph Spence reinforced the collaborative nature of Shroud research. Together we can provide comprehensive witness. The 2005 panels, while impressive, missed 2 decades of discoveries and scientific advance. Information decay undermines evangelistic impact. Solution: creating comprehensive, updated exhibition panels integrating latest scientific discoveries, visual reconstructions, artistic interpretations, cultural adaptations, free global distribution. Modern missions require modern materials. The following panels will be freely available for independent exhibitions, church presentations, educational programs, cultural adaptations, open source evangelism multiplies impact exponentially. Panel 1 establishes foundational credibility through anatomical, forensic, and scriptural alignment. Forensic accuracy, biblical correspondence, scientific validation, medical expertise, historical context. Evidence builds confidence, and confidence enables faith. Panel 2 traces iconographic continuity from early Christianity through medieval documentation, early Christian art, Byzantine mosaics, iconographic patterns, historical timeline. Visual evolution and continuity counters forgery claims while building historical confidence. Panel 3 presents evidence for the pre-1355 existence. Edessa references, Constantinople documentation, numismatic evidence, iconographic analysis, archaeological findings. Panel 4 celebrates Secondo Pia's 1898 breakthrough, photographic negative revelation, medieval impossibility, modern verification, global distribution, scientific revolution. One photograph changed everything and created worldwide evangelistic possibility. Panel 5 explores the VP8 image analyzer breakthrough, 3D spatial data confirmation. The Shroud contains unique image properties, impossible forgery elements. No photograph or painting contains real 3D information. Panel 6 contrasts comprehensive analysis with contested dating. The upper part of the panel deals with Sturp's extensive investigation, and its unanimous scientific conclusions. The lower part deals with carbon dating controversies, sample contamination issues, and alternative theories. Panel 7 examines modern replication attempts, Garlaskelli's 2009 effort, which contained obvious differences. It was missing 3D properties, showing medieval impossibility. And the upper section points to David Rolfe's £1 million challenge. Every failure to replicate strengthens the claim of the shroud's authenticity. Garlaskelli was funded by the CICAP, the Italian Committee for the Investigation of Claims of Pseudoscience. He claimed to have recreated the shroud using medieval materials and techniques. However, his replica lacked the anatomically precise and coded details of the original, especially its 3D spatial properties and image resolution. The side-by-side comparisons highlight the stark differences between Garlaskelli's image and the authentic shroud, reinforcing the uniqueness of the latter. Simultaneously, filmmaker David Rolfe offered £1 million to the British Museum for anyone who could accurately replicate the shroud, an award that remains unclaimed. Panel 8. How was the image made? This panel focuses on the microscopic characteristics of the shroud's image and explores the groundbreaking Enea research led by physicist Paolo Di Lazzaro in 2011. The image is not painted, stained, burned, or dyed. It consists of a superficial yellowing of just the outermost 0.2 micron layer of individual linen fibers, thinner than the surface of a human hair. After over a century of testing, we now know the shroud's image satisfies more than 80 documented requirements, optical, anatomical, chemical, and forensic. That alone eliminates simple explanations. This image shows more than just a faint imprint. It encodes over 22 megabytes of anatomical information across nearly 6 million fibrils. The odds of replicating this image by an artificial means, meaning any known artistic, photographic, chemical, or mechanical process, are estimated at 1 in 10 to the 2.8 millionth power. No method, ancient or modern, can explain the precise three-dimensional molecular scale pattern seen here. This isn't art. It's an engineering phenomenon beyond human reach. In 1976, NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab scanned a glass plate of the shroud's head using a 50 micron light beam at 40 micron intervals, producing a digital grid of 960,000 sample points. Each pixel was a functionally defined measurement of light passing through the linen, digitalized into intensity values. This analog to digital conversion enabled the first 3D reconstruction of the shroud image using the VP8 image analyzer, revealing spatial information invisible to the naked eye, decades before digital imaging existed. The shroud is composed of millions of discrete, oxidized linen fibrils acting like biological pixels. Each fibril is either colored or uncolored, forming a halftone style bitmap where image intensity depends on fiber density per area. The discoloration affects only the top 2 or 3 fibrils of each thread, less than 0.2 microns deep, and correlates precisely with cloth to body distance, encoding 3D anatomical information in a binary matrix. This is a chemically precise encoded system, executed with no pigment, no directionality, and no known natural parallel. Panel 9 explores the brutal Roman flagellation endured by Jesus, as documented by the Shroud of Turin. The wounds, over 370 in total, cover both the front and back of the body, consistent with the flagrum, a Roman whip with lead or bone weights. The shroud's blood stains and scourge marks match this instrument precisely. On the right, overlays show the wound patterns aligning with forensic analysis. Historical context is provided by the column of the flagellation preserved in Rome and traditional illustrations of the scourging event. This was not symbolic punishment, it was calculated act of torture. Panel 10 highlights the severe cranial trauma visible in the Shroud of Turin. Bloodstains suggest a cap-like crown of thorns, not a simple circlet, inflicting widespread scalp wounds. Swelling near the eyebrows and right cheek, along with a likely broken nose, point to blunt force trauma. Fluid around the beard area may be from lung edema, consistent with asphyxiation. The beard appears partially torn, recalling Isaiah 56. These injuries reflect only physical torture, but also the specific prophetic and forensic details encoded in the image of the man on the shroud. Panel 11 shows a visual narrative of the Via Crucis, the way of the cross, tracing Jesus' journey from condemnation to the moment he carries the patibulum toward Golgotha. It blends classical and AI-generated imagery with biblical references and forensic analysis from the Shroud of Turin, highlighting blood patterns and crucifixion wounds. Each panel illustrates key events: his trial, scourging, mocking the burden of the cross, his encounters on the road, and the Roman method of execution. It visually and theologically grounds the Passion with both scripture and physical evidence. Panel 12 traces Jesus' journey from Gethsemane to Golgotha using historical maps, archaeological reconstructions, and photographic crucifixion scene. It highlights the trial locations, execution site, and the tomb, culminating in the moving depiction of Jesus on the cross, surrounded by grieving followers. Panel 13 reveals the physiological reality of crucifixion as seen on the Shroud of Turin. Victims had to push up to breath, aligning with the blood flow patterns recorded. Contrary to tradition, the nails were driven through the wrists, not the palms, matching Roman technique for stability. Most strikingly, the shroud and forensic studies confirmed that 2 nails were used in the feet, one going directly through the heel. And this fulfills Genesis 3:15, where God says to the serpent, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Christ's heel was literally bruised, pierced by iron, while through his death, he crushed the serpent's power. Panel 14 is about the death of Jesus by crucifixion. It was the result of a combination of traumatic shock, progressive asphyxiation, and ultimately heart failure, likely aggravated by pericardial tamponade or rupture. The Gospel of John's account of blood and water flowing from the spear wound aligns with the forensic signature of post-mortem pericardial effusion, serious fluid and blood released from the ruptured cardiac sac. This image visually confirms the anatomical sequence: internal heart failure followed by a validating spear thrust, not as the cause of death, but as the revelation of catastrophic internal rupture. Panel 15 presents a visual journey through the burial of Jesus. On the left, a detailed educational panel integrates scripture, shroud-related forensic data, and classical artwork, illustrating the burial process. On the right, cinematic reconstructions depict the crucifixion scene and the moment Jesus is taken down from the cross, with emotionally charged lighting and historically inspired architecture. The sequence captures the transition from death to burial with reference and narrative continuity. Panel 16 visually narrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ, a central event in Christian belief. On the left, a sequence of images depicts Jesus lying on the tomb, the moments leading up to resurrection, and scenes of discovery by his followers. The right side highlights the empty tomb, an iconic symbol of victory over death, and the astonishment of the disciples upon finding it vacant, with burial cloths left behind. These visuals powerfully capture the emotional impact and profound significance of the resurrection, emphasizing themes of hope, faith, and new beginnings that have inspired countless generations. Panel 17, titled The Fabric of the Shroud, compares the Shroud of Turin's weave thread type with known textiles from both medieval Europe and 1st century Judea. At center, an artistic reconstruction shows Joseph of Arimathea purchasing burial linen. Microscope imagery reveals a distinctive herringbone weave, and archaeological finds, like a linen fragment from Masada, reinforce authenticity. A highlighted Babylonian unit of measure corresponds with the shroud's dimensions, suggesting compatibility with ancient standards. The overall evidence supports a 1st century Judean origin over medieval European manufacture. Panel 18 investigates the blood on the Shroud of Turin through anatomical mapping, UV fluorescence, microscopy, and forensic comparison. The blood type is AB, rare globally, yet common among Middle Eastern Jews. Distinct arterial and venous blood patterns confirm trauma-based bleeding during crucifixion. Micrographs reveal intact red blood cells and blood serum rings, while UV imaging shows oxidative fluorescence halos, impossible to forge. Comparison with the Sudarium of Oviedo reveal identical blood type and wound correspondence. Sturp researchers confirmed human hemoglobin, bilirubin, and albumin, validating authentic trauma-induced blood, not pigment or paint, deposited while the body was still in situ. Panel 19 presents microscopic and geological evidence linking the Shroud of Turin to ancient Jerusalem. Botanist Max Frey identified 58 pollen species on the cloth, 55 of which originate from Israel, particularly the Jerusalem area. Limestone particles found on the shroud match samples from Jerusalem tombs. Microscopic traces of cotton fibers, myrrh, aloes, and burial ointments suggest ritual preparation consistent with 1st century Jewish burial customs. Detailed images show spiny pollen grains from plants native only to the Holy Land. Together, these microtraces strongly argue for an origin in the very environment where Jesus was buried, far from medieval Europe. And this last powerful exposition panel encapsulates the theological foundation of Christian redemption. At the center is the crucified Christ, his face marked by suffering, yet serene, and his sacrifice above the globe. The Shroud of Turin arches like a divine receipt stamped paid in full, visually affirming the ransom paid for humanity. The accompanying verse from Matthew 20:28 echoes Christ's purpose to give his life as a ransom. The lower section integrates key scriptures, emphasizing that our redemption was not symbolic, but actual and costly, sealed by blood. The message is clear. This was a real transaction with eternal consequences. We have brilliant scholars, we have willing hearts in Africa and Asia, but we lack organization to connect expertise with opportunity. What about empowering Shroud Academy? The Shroud has given us its testimony. Technology has given us the tools. God has given us the commission. The only question, will you keep it hidden or carry it to the ends of the earth? 20 panel exhibitions cost under $500. Training workshops via Zoom cost nothing. Small investment, massive evangelistic reach. Who will join the coordinated training effort? Share your expertise via Zoom. Help equip local exhibitions. Transform scattered knowledge into organized mission. Imagine the sculpture in the video, made in silicon and in lifelike size in an exposition. Imagine these panels in India, in Nigeria, in schools, gyms, in cathedrals. Visual testimony, which began in linen, must now speak in every language. The Shroud has spoken, not just to scientists, not just to pilgrims, but to us all. So the question now isn't whether it's real, it's whether we'll keep it hidden. Or finally, let it be seen where it hasn't been before. Let's carry it to the ends of the earth. If you'd like to find more information about the Shroud, I share all of that on my website and YouTube channel. So last not least, as a final act, let's pick our protagonist, even if just as an AI reconstruction. Thank you.
You have read the gospel, you have heard the account, but I left more than words. I left behind a sign, a silent witness in linen, marked by blood, by suffering, by love. You call it the Shroud of Turin. I call it evidence of visual testimony. When they wrapped my body, it was not only for burial. The image you see encoded in that cloth, was not made by human hands. It was left for your time, for a generation that demands proof. And now, with your technology, with artificial intelligence, even my face has been reconstructed. You see me as I was. But what will you do with this gift? In continents where my name is not known and where people have never heard about the Shroud? The Shroud speaks. It carries the marks of crucifixion. It confirms, yes, I died. Yes, it was truly me, not a substitute, not a myth, but a lamb that was slain. To my servants in missions, in apologetics, in evangelism, use what I have left, use the Shroud, for it reaches those unmoved by argument and comforts those that tremble under doubt. It touches both, mind and heart. To those that say, how can I know it's true? Show them. Let them see my silence. Paul wrote of those that build with precious stones, with gold, with silver, with diamonds. The Shroud is such a tool, precious, rare, enduring. Those that use it with diligence are not wasting time. They are building with value, because they labor not in vain, but in my name. So go, show the world what I left for you. Let the nations see the linen that bore my image. Let the skeptics pause. Let the seekers find. For this cloth carries not just blood, it carries the message, I am the one that died and lives forever and ever. Shalom.
What's the Vatican's current schedule for displaying the Shroud in Turin and in various places, and perhaps Africa and the areas you showed where it's not being publicized much in the past?
Yeah, so what is the question?
Well, I thought, is that every 10 years the Shroud is displayed to the public? Why is it every 10 years and not yearly?
Yeah. So I've been in Turin a month ago, and I've spoken extensively to Emanuela Marinelli, and she has shared with me the background of this situation. And the seat in Turin, the Museum of the Shroud, is led by Gian Maria Nazzacone, and he's basically an atheist. Yeah. So, for example, this year the Shroud wasn't shown, and it seems we need to understand that we are working with the spiritual world and opposing forces. And of course, opposing forces, they try also internally to harm. And I think this is a spiritual struggle where dark forces, they do everything in order that the Shroud is not being displayed and known in the world. And we see that with all these objections that come up, right? Yesterday came out a peer-reviewed paper from a Brazilian scientist, and he tries again to disprove that the Shroud is authentic. So I think this is the real reason why there is such a struggle.
However, a few years ago, the Shroud was transferred. The ownership and control of it is now with the Pope. As Pope Leo expressed any desire to start taking it out of hiding, and out of its hermetically sealed air, protected environment and, display it to the public again, like it's been for the last, 1,000 years up until recently.
Well, let's hope that the new Pope has a more open attitude towards the shroud and permits eventually even a second scientific investigation,
What do you mean less hope? It better start with the Pope. He's the one in charge of the Pope.
Let's give the Pope a chance, okay? He just
Right.
came in over here.
Thank you, Otangelo, for your presentation and for all the work that you're doing to evangelize so many places in the world that have not heard one word about the shroud yet. I really commend you for all the work that you're doing. I just want to point out that the exhibit that you showed from the Regina Apostolorum, that was updated last year. So the exhibit that's here on the ground floor is the same exhibit. And so we have that exhibit available in English, Italian, and Spanish. So all of those panels that you rightly pointed out were 20 years old and needed to be updated have been updated. And they're on display at the Regina Apostolorum. And we are working on traditional Chinese characters, Portuguese, and Polish for updating our panels.
Wonderful.
Yes, and Larry has worked with a group in Dallas that has the exhibit
Already
English
in
on one
Spanish.
side, Spanish on the other side. And NG has a traveling exhibit in Las Vegas, so we have 24 panels, very similar. Otangelo and I have been in a lot of communication over the years about the information on the panels, but we have them available already in a traveling format through Athonia.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Could you put up your email again and your website, please, or just give it to us?
Do you have his name?
Yes. Just
It's his name at gmail.com. I wrote it down myself.
Otangelo Grasso at gmail.com.
Yeah.
Thank you, and again, thank you again for a great presentation.
I saw the shroud in 2015, and at that time, they talked about another presentation in 2025, but there really is no schedule for showing the shroud at certain intervals or anything. It comes up when it comes up. And I think there's also a big concern about conserving the shroud. They're afraid that light or handling it, even moving it in the container will lessen the image.
The background is darkening.
Background, yeah.
And the background is catching up with the image.
So it's really hard to say what is the best schedule for showing the shroud.
Well, it has survived 2,000 years, and I think if it would be shown every 10 years or even less for 5 days or so, that wouldn't be a big impact, I imagine.
I'm going to say that I know there's a lot of fading on the shroud. I think what we see now is about 10% of what was there in the first century. That's how much it's faded. So you got to be careful, you got to be watchful of that. The only other question I have is, you mentioned 34 trillion watts. How do you come up with that?
Yeah, by Paolo Di Lazzaro, he wrote a scientific paper in 2014 or something like that. 2011, right. And there he came up with this calculation. So I took it from that scientific paper.
You, sir.
Just a comment on the fading. I've seen some papers that say it's going to fade anyway. If they keep it hidden, it's fading.
Yeah.
And so, what are we gaining if we keep it hidden? It may disappear in 200 years or 100 years. If we show it to people, we can actually use it for evangelization. And I also wanted to, second or third the comment and thank you for all the effort you put into with the 2 talks I've heard. They were absolutely fabulous, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other quote.
I just have a comment. It's good to see it, but I think what really a conference like this is about is everyone here going out and telling people about it or putting together a program, because not everybody can afford to go to Italy and see it. And it is a big deal when they do show it because they need a lot of security. There's a lot of people that go there, and it's quite a big thing to put on. So anyway.
Do we have any questions? Go ahead.
I was wondering what specific AI tools you use for your videos, and do you foresee any dangers in using AI for these this sort of experiments and presentations?
Yeah, I think that Sora is a fantastic tool to make short videos, but I think also that it must and will be improved much more. And I use a bunch of different available apps and AI tools, and it's a mix of it. So it's not just one tool. I use Inkscape, iPitsy, Sora, all the other AI bots, and many other tools. So it's a mix.
Is it true that when you find images, and you made a lot of your images, but when you find them through AI, that those are not copyrighted?
Yeah, they're not copyrighted.
That's what I thought.
No, they're not. Yeah.
Excellent.
I have a comment. It is the message that we bring forward and spread through the world that counts. Yes, it is nice to see the real shroud, but I myself believe that it's not necessary. If you have faith and you believe in it, and you could take that with you through the messages from the shroud.
Other questions? All right. Let's give Otangelo Grasso a hand.